Good morning. As a gerontologist and a lawyer, I've been fortunate over the past decade and a half to learn from older adults as they've talked about their experiences as they age and their hopes, their wishes, their fears for their present and their future. Some of them are personal friends, some are colleagues that I meet on committees and usually talking during breaks. Then there are the hundreds and hundreds of who have been kind enough to share pieces of their lives with me in the process of research. But before speaking to the legal considerations involved in respecting choice, particularly at the end of life, I'd like to share a few personal and professional observations. I guess the very first one is that we never know what the end of life is for a person until after the fact. That is, after the person has actually died. So to the extent that we try to talk about and separate out quality of life at the end of life from quality of life for older adults more broadly, we may be on a fool's errand. At the same time, age-wise, end-of-life considerations tend to be more pressing and more directly affect older adults than any other age group. In Canada and the United States, at least, they represent the majority of people who face death in any given year. I believe that we need to look at quality of life and respecting choices for older adults at the end of life in the broader context of how older adults are perceived and how they're treated within Canadian society. And this is particularly the case for the oldest of the old, who are largely women who are widowed and in their 80s or 90s. The end of life point for an individual person or group of seniors is based in part on decisions that the person makes, but it's also influenced by family and friends, the person's culture, and it's profoundly affected by the decisions that healthcare providers make. Individually and as a group, they in turn are often influenced by the decisions that governments make. And most of these latter decisions are unstated and remain hidden from public view. From research, we know that many older adults at the end of life are concerned about achieving a good death, by which people tend to mean a death where they have a sense of control over their lives and decisions made about their lives and their care, that they have reassurances that they will receive good care, including having their pain and symptoms well managed, and including not feeling abandoned in the process of dying. In the field of gerontology, tells us that a good death can involve other considerations, such as having time to be able to say what needs to be said to family, strengthening relationships with loved ones. Older adults are often concerned about the perceived burden on families and others close to them. They're also concerned about inappropriate prolonging of dying. Research in North America and Europe indicates that a large proportion of deaths, up to 70% of them, occur within hospitals or long-term care facilities. And interestingly, in hospitals, older adults are actually much less likely to receive aggressive treatment than younger adults, and yet we still have this strong public fear. In looking at how we respect choices, we must be aware of both ageism and discrimination in healthcare and the potential. Of the crucial aspects of good death, having some control over life and the process of dying is fundamental. An older woman friend once described her own aging as a lot like becoming a real-life Lily Tomlin in the movie The Incredible Shrinking Woman. The world gets larger and larger, and you become smaller and smaller. It becomes harder and harder to be heard and be seen. Your wishes can easily become invisible and irrelevant to others. It's easy to feel that in this way in a health system or in a society at the end of life. So that's the societal backdrop that I'd like people to remember when we talk about respecting choices legally, medically, or ethically. The legal framework for respecting choices around healthcare in BC is relatively clear and seems to respect choices. The healthcare consent law in the province codifies and clarifies a number of key elements about specific healthcare decisions, including the fact that people are presumed to be capable of making their own healthcare decisions. And there's fairly broad parameters about their right to control the healthcare decisions around their lives, including at the end of life. As long as they're mentally capable, people have the right to make decisions about their own healthcare treatment. These are their choices, their decisions. We should be looking to them and not to forms to find out what those decisions are. In order to make those decisions, they need to have rights to appropriate information to help them make an informed decision. The provincial healthcare laws also set out legal rules about emergency treatment, what happens if a person is or becomes mentally incapable of consenting or not giving consent to treatment, who gets to make those decisions on their behalf if they're not mentally capable, and how that person, the substitute, is required to make those decisions. If a person is mentally capable, they have the right to choose or not to choose medical treatment, even if it might lead to or hasten their death. An adult cannot demand specific treatments, but they can seek a second opinion from a healthcare provider who may come to a different conclusion about what is medically appropriate. Legally, as we've heard earlier this morning, the person cannot legally ask somebody to help them hasten their death. Well, they can ask, but it's not legal for the person to do it or to help them with it. Indeed, it's against the criminal law to do so. And one such case is actually the subject of this evening's public lecture that I invite you to attend. People can plan for their future, particularly the possibility that they may become mentally incapable of making their own decisions and expressing their choices. A person can choose to write down what they want, or they can choose a person to make decisions on their behalf in that event. To give instructions or to pick somebody that they want is an important part of respecting choices. In British Columbia, the only legally recognized and therefore enforceable document for identifying wishes or picking a substitute is through the representation agreement. And there's two different types within British Columbia, a Section 7 and a Section 9. Section 7 don't have sort of a defined mental capability, and they're limited. You can't make decisions regarding the refusal of life-supporting care and treatment with that particular authority. The Section 7 and Section 9 are broader, and these types of agreements require a lawyer to create them. With these agreements, you pick somebody that you trust, but the agreement can also include specific instructions. These agreements also include binding authority to refuse life treatment. Advanced planning of this kind can be very beneficial. First of all, it opens up the process of communication within families about wishes, desires, beliefs, and fears. It also starts the process of communication with one's physician, although realistically, at the end of life, that's not likely to be the person making the medical decisions for the person. At the same time, it's essential that we understand why people tend not to do this kind of advanced planning and to respect those choices. We need to assure that older adults are never given the impression that they will not receive health care or that they will receive less health care if they don't sign an advance directive. We have to be careful about what we're promoting in this area as well. One of the things that people may not be aware of is that any time that a person writes down instructions, in contrast to appointing a representative, they may actually be narrowing the kinds of things that they can be taken into consideration. With instructions, the person must act with what you said, and that may not exactly what you meant or would have decided if faced with the same decision today. Issues such as your best interests become lost when you write instructions to do this or not to do that. If a person is not mentally capable and doesn't have a legally appointed substitute, then healthcare providers are required by law to obtain information and a decision from a person who's authorized by law to make that decision. In some instances, that substitute decision maker may be a committee of a person or a representative. But if there is no committee or representative, the law in the province for healthcare sets out a prescriptive order, a mandatory list for determining who has the priority for these decisions. The healthcare providers must start at the top and then stop at the first person on the list who meets the other criteria in terms of age, contact with the person, as well as their willingness to take on the responsibility. It's not always clear who is chosen when you have two people that are equal on that list and meet all the other criteria. For example, a brother and a sister or two children. Yes? It's a little slower, so okay, my apologies. I was trying to think of the 10 minutes. The healthcare providers and the substitutes are expected to act according to the person's express wishes, the values, beliefs, and best interests. Some people, including older adults, might not have anyone who falls into these particular categories, and then by default, the care provider must choose, and put that in quotes, a person authorized by the public guardian trustee. And that could include a friend or a person employed at the office of the public guardian trustee. So by law, on a positive note, there's always someone there who has the legal authority to make healthcare decisions on your behalf. The downside is the person may not be the person that you wanted and may not know your wishes as well as you would like or at all, but there is always someone there. Anyone who's given the responsibility of being a temporary substitute is required to talk with and consult with that person to find out their wishes and comply with any instructions or wishes that they have expressed while they were capable. And if they don't know that and can't find it out, then to act in according to the person's best interests. Just as a few final points, when we're talking about any form of for expressing wishes, there are sometimes some unfortunate trends that we may see that tend to undermine the whole idea of respecting choices at the end of life. And in part, that is the push for advanced directives, particularly ones that have instructions. They can easily become outdated and not represent what a person would really want. In many cases, the focus is on the form, getting it signed, reading what it says, so that the communication between the real person and the healthcare providers, or the substitute person and the healthcare providers, gets lost in the process. The other key issue is that the apparent reason for the drive for advanced care planning at a systems level is not necessarily in terms of determining what people actually want at the end of life, in terms of respecting choices and promoting choices, but sometimes out of a mistaken belief that older adults are receiving too much care at the end of life, and that these end of care lifers are a primary driver of healthcare costs in the province or within Canada. Interestingly, the research in this area shows that getting people to sign advanced directives can be notoriously hard. One of the most comprehensive American programs, called Support, cost $28 million and was shown to not be very effective in its goals of getting a greater percentage of persons to sign. So these are some of the considerations, both at a policy level and at a legal level, in terms of respecting the choices for older adults. I'd like to now pass it on to other panelists. Thank you.